What if your greatest leadership skill isn't what you say, but how well you listen? Today's guest, Christine Miles, is helping us break the pattern of surface level communication and unlock the power of listening as a leadership superpower. Welcome to Beyond the Pattern, Life and Leadership Unlocked. I'm your host, Bukola, keynote speaker, HR strategist, and leadership coach with over 20 years of experience supporting leaders through growth and transition. I'm also a first-generation Nigerian American. My name, Bukola, means added to the greatness in Yoruba, and this podcast is one way I live that out. We're living in a time of constant acceleration. AI, automation, and performance culture push us to go faster and do more. But speed isn't the same as wisdom, and going fast doesn't mean we're moving forward. That's why I created this space to reclaim the human side of leadership. If you want to stay connected, be sure to follow the show and hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you won't miss any episode when it drops every other week. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been following since day one, I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. Welcome to Beyond the Pattern, Life and Leadership Unlocked, where we explore the habits, beliefs, and blind spots that shape how we lead, relate, and grow. I'm your host, Bukola, and this show is all about self-awareness, about slowing down enough to ask, what patterns am I repeating, and are they helping or hurting me? Each week, we talk to leaders, coaches, change makers, and everyday people who have done the deep work to shift the way they live and lead. Today, we're diving into one of the most overlooked leadership skills, and that's listening. And we're joined by someone who's helping organizations and individuals around the world do it differently. Christine Miles is a global pioneer in listening intelligence, the award-winning author of What Is It Costing You Not to Listen? And the founder of The Listening Path, a transformational system that is changing how the world listens and connects. Her work is being used by Fortune 100 companies, educational institutions, and change makers globally. She is also the CEO of Equipped and brings over 25 years of experience helping individuals and organizations create cultures of empathy, drive performance, and achieve lasting success. Christine's thought leadership has been featured in USA Today, ABC, NBC, NPR, and Sirius XM. Welcome, my girl, Christine. Thank you so much for being here.
It's always terrifying when somebody reads your bio because let's set the bar a little lower,
So no, I mean, it's an impressive bio. You've done some great things. I mean, how are you doing? How are you doing in general, just with all the stuff you have going on?
Yeah, well, it's a pretty exciting time. I mean, where I am now is a culmination of literally my childhood and my adulthood combined. It culminating to this kind of crescendo where I've scaled something where listening can be something that is learning how to do it can be available to kids from ages 5 or 6 to as old as we live, and that's huge because the hardest part of my business was really how to scale me. How do you teach? It's hard to teach listening because most people haven't been taught. So how do we make it simple, repeatable, and scalable? And so I'm proud of the fact that I've unlocked that, and we're just getting started in how we're reaching people. So it's
Nice.
Things never happen fast enough.
Yeah. But no, it sounds like you got some really great traction. So I'm excited for you. Before we dive in, Christine, is there anything you'd like to add or share with our audience that I didn't touch on in the bio? Or even how can folks best stay connected with you and your work? Just let's get that.
Yeah, they can follow me on Christine Miles Listens on social media. They can follow us at the Listening Path Systems on social media or the Listening Path website. So they'll find me,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I appreciate that. And find me is what I will say, is that I've had people reach out to me directly, either on my cell or email or on LinkedIn, and I'll respond because that's really, sometimes it leads to working together, sometimes it leads to a friendship, sometimes it leads to just having that initial connection, but it's worthwhile to do that. I always learn from it and I appreciate it.
Nice. Oh, I love that. So I always like to remind our guests and our listeners, this is a conversation. It's not a performance. So feel free to take your time and reflect and we'll just go wherever the conversation goes.
Well, can I say something
Oh
before you
yeah, sure, sure, sure.
talk about what you're doing? Because I think it so well marries to what I do and talk about. You said this is a podcast, and your mission is about self-awareness, understanding yourself. By the way, it's thundering here, so if you hear loud booms, that's
No, no, I'm good. Mhm.
uh, and what I want to focus on is listening is twofold. It to me it is the foundation of emotional intelligence. It's the building blocks. If you listen well to yourself, your self-awareness goes up. Listen well to others, your others awareness goes up. So those are the foundational tools to really becoming more emotionally intelligent in the workplace, at home, in our lives, which is a big part of being a star performer and having the best results. So I appreciate how the questions that you think about, ask about, and talk about are such good listening questions to yourself.
Mhm.
And slowing down to do that, it's exactly what we need to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Thank you for that. So now, before we get into just talking about patterns in leadership, I thought it'd be good to just start with something a little more personal. The show tends to focus on what's beneath the surface. So I thought we could just start with, what's something about your journey that shaped how you lead, but might surprise people. So, when you think about your background and how you've had to lead yourself and others in your life, even your business,
Yeah.
what's something about your journey that has shaped how you lead that might surprise people?
Well, for those people who don't know me, this will be surprising. For those who have heard of me or seen me, it may not be, but it's interesting to use the word shape, because I always say my mother shaped how I listen. She didn't teach me, she shaped it. And how she shaped it was a number of ways, but primarily, ironically, it was really the story below the surface about her that most people did not see or understand. And my role, as early as I can remember, 5 would probably be my first memory of listening differently to the story below the surface, is what shaped it. Because my role in the family was really to understand what most people didn't see, because my mother had suffered a early childhood loss. She lost her mother in infancy from childbirth. So my mother believes she was the cause of her mother's death. It's a longer story, and carried great pain and sadness. But my mother was funny and warm, exuberant. She lit up the room. So it's very confusing to people because they couldn't reconcile the outward with what was underneath. And when she would express that pain, and she would verbalize it, people would rush to remind her of kind of all the great things in her life, me included. And it was such a miss for people. They were well intended, but I could see it from the pain just intensified for my mother because they weren't really getting her, understanding her. And so I saw that very early, and consequently, I also learned how to pay attention to it. So I got this burden as a kid, but I also got a gift that totally shaped how I show up. And it was really as early as high school that I could see that I was achieving things that my natural ability shouldn't have been allowing me to achieve, because I had this kind of skill baked into me so young.
Got it. No, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you touched on that moment, and it sounds like you realized you had to change, or you had to, it seemed like the listening became a big priority for you related to your mom. Can you talk more about that moment when you realized something had to change?
I think it was like water and oxygen. It was just part of it was part of what I did. It wasn't something that was verbalized. It wasn't like, it was just expected that my mother, the deeper meaning, and, if we got Freud involved, or my therapist, would be that my mother was motherless, and I was the girl that came into her life that could replace that mother figure. So that needed to change for sure. How I viewed myself in relation to my mother was a pattern that I had to unlock. But the ability to listen and understand was really something that was never, it just was, because it was the world I was navigating. And by the way, my mother was a very understanding person. She was very good listener, very deeply connected to people emotionally. She could touch them and move them because of the way she also listened and understood, because she also, she craved what she didn't get, so she often gave it. So both my mother and my father had this ability that I learned from watching them as well. But like I said, the real pattern wasn't about listening or doing it differently. It was really more about understanding the role in relation to my mother that I took on for a long time. That was emotionally, you know, too much as a child. That it was too much for me to have to bear that as a child, the burden part of it.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And how did that experience end up shaping who you were, who you are as a leader today?
Yeah. So I think there's two things. I think the I'm a very responsible person. So almost hyper responsible. And I think I've had to learn over time and through practice to not take on all the responsibility. I learned that pretty early in my life, but that was definitely one. And accepting help and allowing others to let me in and those kinds of things, or let them in rather to help me because I was so used to having to carry that weight. So it was just natural, but it wasn't healthy. It just wasn't healthy. I was involved in an automobile accident when I was 28. And for 3 years, I had what I call the chronic blissful years of the post accident. And I say blissful because once chronic pain goes acute, you're in a different realm. So I went from a 3, 4 pain all the time to a 8, 9, sometimes 10 pain, like crippling pain. And that's a whole different world. Well, I didn't have a choice at that point. I had to have help.
Yeah.
I'd be at the shopping mall for Christmas. I couldn't carry packages I'd have to lay down. Like I just couldn't avoid it. So the universe gave me a pretty big kick to say, get over this. That's one pattern that I definitely had to shift in terms of the leadership. This is interesting because it's such a deep conversation.
Mhm.
I'll think about what the other one was as we're talking. Yeah, but that was a big one.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you for that. I was going to ask about what you've had to unlearn, but you walked us right into it, just in terms of you being open to help.
Yeah, it's
Thank
hard.
you.
It's hard when your strength is really allowing help to be there. I think that was a big paradigm shift. I know what the other one I was going to say is that, but I think that's the paradigm shift. It's counterintuitive. Oh, I can do it myself. Oh, I got this. When really the strongest people are the ones that know how to allow others in.
Mhm.
It's less protective and it's much safer than trying to do it on your own.
And collaborative, right? You get input, other people solving for problems you didn't even think about.
Yeah.
And what about, I want to hear more about how, after even the accident, and you are now working through this pain, you eventually found your way to leading your business, leading, a number of different work streams. Can you talk more about how your leadership style has evolved as a result of some of those early experiences?
Yeah, so I was a forced entrepreneur. I mean, I call myself a forced entrepreneur. I was on more of a corporate track. I worked for an employee assistance program that was freestanding back in the day, so that was outside of a company that we served businesses all around the community that I live in, 100 plus companies, QVC being one of them. So I was really on that corporate track, and I was one day. It was a month into my accident that I got this job, and so I did this job for almost 4 years. And then one day I just flipped on a dime and like I said, I was struggling to work. I didn't not want to work, but I couldn't work full time. I couldn't sit in a chair. I couldn't handle all the demands. So I started consulting and doing things part time and then ultimately in 2007, I started my own consulting and training practice when it was time, when I had enough health to go out on my own. But I don't know, that was like, what do I want to do? Do I want to play it safe and just do what's enough, or I had to redefine how I entered the career force because I couldn't have somebody telling me I had to be at a job at a certain time and this and that. I had to figure it out myself. That was very scary. It felt like a big risk at the time. But it was, that's the pivot point, right? Like that's the pattern, safety, risk. Where do you go? And I think for me, taking that chance and seeing that payoff, ultimately because I could really live my own purpose in the work on a whole different level, just changed the game on everything. How I
Mhm.
influence, how I lead, who I surrounded myself with, who my clients were. I started making all those choices instead of that being handed to me.
And is there anything more you can share just around performance, how you lead your
And
business today?
when I was first doing my work, I mean, I had gotten promoted pretty quickly to a manager and leader in the EAP that I worked for, and I went from peer level within 6 months of starting to promoted over people that had been there for quite a long time. And boy, did I learn some hard lessons there. And you have to approach things. I mean, it's so obvious to me now, but I probably made every mistake there was to make that I didn't really have somebody mentoring me on how to make that transition. And in hindsight, that's what I would have. I would have gotten help for. The pattern was, again, doing it myself
Mhm.
rather than realizing that I needed somebody to really guide me to take the right steps rather than trying to figure it out on my own. So that was a pretty important shift. And so now, all I want is for people that want to help me do things rather than me telling them what to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now my happy place is, how about you tell me what to do rather than me tell you what to do? So that's
Got it.
that's
Got it.
a wonderful evolution. Yeah.
Got it. And then the evolution to listening as a primary focus of your business, how did that come into play? And can you talk to us more about just, how that's,
Yeah.
yeah, what it was,
Well,
what it was then versus now. Yeah.
yeah, I saw a pattern in businesses. So I was always so first of all, my first career, I was a family therapist. So at 22, I graduated from undergrad with a degree in psychology, and within 2 months, found myself knocking on people's doors and saying, "Hi, I'm Christine. I'm your family therapist." So not everybody's career trajectory. It was a pilot program out of the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. It was brand new, written by a very high level clinician that ran this clinic, and it was for the state of Pennsylvania. And I was in one of these pockets where this was being instituted. So I was really one of the first people. This program is still happening today. So I was one of the first ones in it. I did that intensively for 5 years. I worked home based, school based, and then I actually worked at the hospital at a very young age. So I got this high level training, systems, how do you solve a systemic problem rather than just treat the symptoms, was all my family therapy training. When I started working at the EAP, I started working not just with people, but with organizations around how do you solve these system problems around communication, around different skills, harassment, all the things that you live and have been working in for most of your career, Bukola, all the people.
Mhm.
And but it was different because it was short snippets of things. It wasn't longer stretches. And so when I started my own practice, here's what I found, because people were asking me to solve deeper problems, is that I was solving the same problem over and over again, no matter the industry, no matter the client. And it was like this, like it showed up in a flash. And that problem was, it wasn't about what people were saying in meetings, with colleagues, with customers, anything, you name it. It was all about what people didn't understand. That's what I was solving, all the misunderstandings, all the miscommunications. And I'm like, here's the systemic communication problem we have. We teach speaking, we don't teach listening, and we're expecting people to be successful at it. And it's wasting time, resources, emotional energy. People are solving the wrong problems and missing key information. And that's what we have to fix. That's when I really realized we got to do something different. And I've spent the last 10 plus years codifying everything I've learned in this simple framework to solve these misunderstandings. And part of what I realized too is we're solving this problem way too late. We're waiting till people are 25, 35, 45, 55 plus. Why aren't we teaching children this rather than just speaking? So that's when the mission really grew, is to start in elementary classrooms and as well as in corporate meeting rooms.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Wow. And what are some patterns leaders fall into that block them from really listening? What have you found?
Well, it's hard to fix a problem you don't know you have. That's the first pattern. And why would anybody know they have this problem? So I think we have a systemic pattern in how we approach communication. So since mankind, I mean, going back to the ancient Roman times, speaking has been taught, and this is what we value, reward, and teach all through, is speak, tell, and know. Speak, tell, and know. I mean, think about it. What do you do well? How do you make a presentation? How do you tell a story? How do you come in and solve, give good answers? All this is just kind of repetitively, pushed into us. And then we're wondering why people aren't listening. So most people don't even realize it's a problem they have because it's so normalized not to do it.
Especially if you've gotten through life with some wins,
Sure.
fight it, you know?
Yeah.
So, okay, okay.
And people think they're listening because they don't even know what real listening looks like, because we don't have a paradigm for that either. So part of, as someone in the field of psychology, active listening's been around for a long time, and people say, oh, you got to use your active listening skills. And I'm a true fan of active listening, because here's what you're supposed to do: actually understand what the speaker says, the feelings, the meaning behind it. The problem is, active listening is developed for psychologists, not for the average Joe. So there's 11 things you have to do to effectively actively listen. And the people who aren't trained on it reduce it to you're just paying attention. You're just trying to show that you're listening. And even the ones that are trained on it, because it's so surface and how they're dealing with it, have trouble getting to the deeper emotional and context that they need to really understand the other person. So it's outdated. It's just an outdated model for our modern world and for so many reasons.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what about for the listening path? I know you have a full system that sounds pretty comprehensive and advanced. Is there anything you could do to give us a glimpse into what the listening path actually looks like and how it rewires those habits?
Yeah. Well, so I think we've been very focused on behaviors rather than tools. So, listen, I'm not in construction, so I'm going to use this metaphor with all due respect to anybody who knows how to put anything together. But you wouldn't build a house with just good behaviors. Like you wouldn't just say, hey, let's show up and let's get the wood. And you need a hammer, you need a nail, you need screwdrivers, you need tools to be effectively build something. And so we don't have that in our communication. So what I've done is design tools that do the work for the person so that it isn't so complicated, so that you have the right tool for the right circumstances so that the meaning finds you and all these enemies of listening don't take over. So it's simple, it's just simple and easier, two different things. You still got to practice, but it does the work for you. And once you know how to use the tools, that just you click into a whole nother paradigm. Even very young kids, like we've had teachers say, I just say to my fourth graders, just use your listening path tools. And suddenly they go into a different perspective taking because they know what that means because there's a common language for it. And they know, hey, I know I use this tool to get somebody else's perspective. I use this tool to show them, to shine a light that I understand their perspective. So there's ways that the tools do the work for them.
And you talked about the enemies of listening. I'm curious. Can you give us just a glimpse into what that is too?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Uh-huh.
Well, most people think it's technology these days, and it is certainly one of them because of the amount of time we're on screens, which is insane. I just heard this, Bukola, the other day that 40% of US 2-year-olds have their own iPad. That's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So we're rewiring the brain. So technology is an enemy, but the real enemy is inside our heads. So everything that's going on in is called the subconscious brain, below the surface, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your impulses, are all the things that are really in control when we're listening if we're not trained or don't have the right tools. So if the subconscious, just like you're uncovering patterns, that's what the subconscious brain is doing when we're listening. The pattern is let me mind read. Let me let me judge what's being said. Let me rehearse what's happening. Let me, this is what our minds are doing. Our subconscious mind is doing when we're trying to listen. It's pulling us everywhere but to the focus of the person that we're supposed to be listening to, telling us to do everything but listen.
Well, and you talked about how you've seen this from different business and industry perspectives. You mentioned the hospital. You mentioned, I think you mentioned QVC. You mentioned a few
Yep.
different businesses. And so I can totally see how listening, when it comes to the dynamic between the patient, sometimes, I know personally, I feel like I've experienced a situation where it's like, okay, is this physician following me? There's like a separate conversation in their head I'm not a part of. And I'm trying to use this time
Yeah.
to get to the root of what I need.
Yeah.
But
11
yeah.
seconds, 11 seconds before a doctor, that's the average before a doctor interrupts you. 11 seconds. And the number one reason they're sued is because of communication, not because of bad outcomes. It's because of how they communicate. So the listening path will teach you not only how to be good at it, but how to be more efficient at it. Because out of respect for doctors, they're driven by time frames. They have short amounts of time with their patients. So if they don't get to things quickly, they're in trouble. Because I've waited in the waiting room for a long time. Now I'm always willing to wait if I know that doctor's going to spend time with me. But what if they could be good at it as well as and efficient at it? That's a whole different thing.
Mhm.
So when you have the right tools, you stay on track. So you don't get lost on all these conversational side trails, right? Because the analogy is you wouldn't go hiking in the woods without tools or supplies in your backpack. And we are literally in the conversational woods wandering around without any tools or supplies. So if you have the right tools, you're going to stay on the main path to get to the understanding quickly. Doctors can do it, lawyers can do it better, salespeople can do it better, children, teachers, everyone. And then we don't waste time and resources either. And the person feels like they're understood.
Mhm. And what do you say to leaders who feel like listening slows them down or they resist it as a skill?
Well, they're right. and they're wrong. So the right part is it will slow you down initially. First of all, until you learn how to do it, you have to slow down to learn something new. That's like any skill. But even if you take a little more time to listen well, it'll speed you up in the long run because you'll get to the root cause of things and then you'll solve the right problems. So you eliminate all this misunderstanding that's invisible and get to the solve much more quickly when you shine this light on what you understand. So it's a slow down to speed up. I talk a lot about, I was a field hockey player. You and I share that, of course, Bukola, right?
Love field hockey. Yeah,
Nobody understands the rules except us. But besides,
exactly.
equated to soccer, as field hockey and soccer are the same game.
Exactly.
One
With a fiberglass ball that you have to be careful of because it will
right.
hit you in the head. Yeah.
Yeah, I played in the days where there were no masks or anything. But basically, any team sport, football, basketball, field hockey, soccer, if you only go down the field straight, you're gonna have trouble scoring at a high level. What the best teams do is use every inch of the field. And what they do is they pull the ball back before they go wide and down. So if I just hit the ball down the field as a hockey player and I constantly go forward, people are going to get it. But if I move the ball back and over and across and I mix it up, that's how we widen the field to really create a play that allows us to score. And the same is true in life. When we're in a conversation, if people want to go forward, where's this going? Where's this end? Where's it? What we really need to do is pull the conversation back to get the root cause in order to really get to the goal, which is to understand.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I'm hearing you say is you have to move slow before you can move fast and be efficient.
Or move back, at
Oh,
least.
move back, move
Yeah,
back. Okay, move
yeah.
back.
You need to move back before you go forward,
Got
most
it.
often.
Got
Yeah.
it. Oh, that makes sense. We had talked about just like the hospital environment. I think I'm just trying to imagine if we have one hospital that has fully taken on and embraced the listening path,
Hmm.
totally embraced it. And then you have another hospital that is operating business as usual, no knowledge of the listening path. Can you talk us through like what are some of the obvious things that would be different as the wins or the benefits
Yeah.
over time, like the outcomes, the impact? Yeah.
I really appreciate that question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that, so I really appreciate it. So let's talk about culture first of all. So we know what it feels like to be listened to well. I mean, if anybody's gone to therapy and a good therapist, if you pay them, it's probably because they've listened well, and it's an experience that is really it builds trust, it builds connection, and it also builds toughness because times are challenging at work. They're never perfect. So what you'll see is a more connected culture and a loyalty from people because when they feel cared for, seen, valued, and understood, when they feel like their point of view matters, they'll stay with you. They'll be happier. They'll go to the mat for you. If you want somebody to follow you as a leader, shine a light on what you understand and they will never leave you because that's what people they want to feel seen. You don't always have to agree with them. You can't always do what they need you to do. But if you understand it, shine a light on what you understand, that's when everything changes. So you'll see cultural changes and cultural shifts like crazy. And then you also see meetings that are more effective because we waste a lot of time in meetings. We all have been there. Meetings are one of the things that makes people most miserable in companies. It's like meetings aren't effective. We talk about the same things. We never get anywhere. We have too many meetings. I mean, do you hear this as well, Bukola, or is it just
Oh
yeah?
my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
One
I mean,
time,
especially during COVID, I think there was meeting fatigue for sure, just because there were so many unknowns in the environment and it was taking a toll on folks without realizing. Uh,
yeah. Well, and now because we've stayed, many of us now we're in hybrid models, but there's not a walk to the water cooler sometimes till your next meeting. So you go from meeting to meeting to meeting all on camera without much break unless you're really disciplined and build that into your culture. So that's another rollover that people feel exhausted by the time that, and especially if they're not valuable. So
yeah.
we're multitasking more and so forth. So that's one thing that changes. And I'll tell you a story. We were working with a client, and first day we were working on, it was an HR team working on competency building and different stuff. This was outside of the listening path. We were doing some work, and then we were also doing the listening path. But after we did the day one, where we are going to get into the listening path stuff, I said, well, there was one person that wasn't there that day that was there the next day. And I said, who wants to catch her up on what they missed yesterday? It was very interesting because nobody could piece together the day from in order. They start in the middle. Well, we did this. Okay, well, let's go back to the beginning, I said, and let's walk her through every aspect of what we did. So for 45 minutes, we spent aligning around everything we walked through the day before. That meant we all understood what we did, what we still needed to do, and where we were going to move before we jumped into day two. But how often does that happen in a meeting? Zero. So we just jump in the middle as if there's alignment. We talk about things, and then just more shrapnel is kind of spread about. We don't really have a clear picture. So this is where, when we have this common language, and that's what we worked on, we taught them to make sure they're doing that. So they're not just jumping in. You take less than 45 minutes once you get practiced at it, but learning to align before you start solving the next one or the next thing. Align, understand, shine a light before you go to the next thing really minimizes a lot of wasted time, solving the wrong problems, disagreements, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Got it. No, that makes sense. The intentional check-ins. I'm a big fan of that too. I was thinking because you mentioned sometimes there are conflicts that show up in a legal battle of some sort with hospitals or with businesses. I would imagine organization embracing the listening path, I would imagine it would help reduce conflict
And lawsuits.
and even legal
And
risk.
lawsuits.
And
And
what and what? What was that?
and lawsuits.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And people not, being able to give feedback and talk about performance and have difficult conversations and talk about diversity and have, instead of we can't say anything, no, let's have healthy conversations. Discourse is part of innovation.
Right.
So we had an HR team that ironically was at a hospital in UCLA, and once we did some of the work, they're like, now we can have the real conversation because they all came to a common understanding. So rather than dealing with all, I don't agree, I don't understand, that confusion, they got so aligned around what they understood that they could start to solve the problem differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's more exciting because otherwise I'm just talking. The real meeting's happening in the parking lot.
Right, right, right. No, I think I can relate to that because I do feel like there have been times I've been in conversations where maybe I'm trying to communicate something I feel passionately about.
Mhm.
And you can sometimes feel made to feel wrong, like you're making me wrong, without even like really taking on my point of view. So I can
Yeah.
see how, it probably takes a lot to even push past that and still stay engaged, stay focused on being present with the person in front of you. I would imagine the
Oh,
audience is like really curious about the listening path and all the tools and how it works.
can
What?
I just say something about
Sure.
that? That's a pattern I think many of us suffer from. I won't say we all suffer from.
Yeah.
A pattern is to confuse agreement and understanding. And so they have nothing to do with each other. And I actually had a client say to me, I'm going to take this to an extreme, Christine. What if somebody says to me they believe in the Ku Klux Klan and I, vehemently disagree with that? How do I have that conversation? And he was just hypothesizing. And
Mhm.
you don't have to agree, but you can understand, where does that come from? Where did that start? Help him, get inside his world or her world to see where that may have the inception of that. Because when we get more of an understanding of where it comes from, I mean, I grew up in Hershey, Pennsylvania, for heaven's sakes. There were two brown people in my high school. So how would I have a context for what a larger world looks like of diversity? So, that's when I moved to Philadelphia, I was like, oh, here the rest of the world is. That was exciting to me. But we live in a myopic environment sometimes and we don't even realize it. So if we come from the perspective of understanding where these sometimes very difficult ideas that we disagree with, where they come from, it helps us at least bridge the gap to having the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, and there are oftentimes certain words that can be triggering, or they're just these words are baked with so much kind of
Yeah,
emotion and meaning that it can affect how you hear or listen
yeah.
if you're not intentional. Yeah.
Yeah, and because those patterns are baked in our subconscious minds anyway, and what we believe and is subconscious so much of the time that we don't even realize it. And that's not that's part of our work, is to get more aware. We know that intellectually, but when we think we have to agree to understand, that really stops so much of the really important work. Discourse, innovation, problem solving gets stuck around. I don't agree with you, Bukola.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and even some of the work that I do just in talking about patterns,
Yeah,
I touch on the brain and science and how the brain has a tendency to gravitate to things that are familiar, things that are
sure.
routine.
Safety.
And so if you have an upbringing where you've been raised to believe certain things about certain, you know, kind of topics,
Yeah,
I can see how, again, you have to be intentional because the brain is wired in a way where it likes familiarity,
yeah.
and so you have to be intentional to kind of, stay
Right.
present and open. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we do dysfunctional things, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
word functional lives inside the word
Yeah.
dysfunctional.
Yeah. No, no,
Apply
definitely.
one situation to another, and there we go, right? Yeah,
Definitely, definitely. Well, I mean, I know my experience of you. I mean, just definitely you're an excellent communicator and I definitely feel seen and heard whenever I talk to you. And so I can only imagine your impact just on others in a group context when you're facilitating these sessions. Is there anything more you want to share with the audience, our listeners, about, advice on how to be more effective as a leader as it relates to listening? I recognize they haven't all taken the listening path, but any
yeah.
more you can share there?
Yeah, so look, you're doing the same work that I am. The first problem to solve is bringing something into your awareness. That's really the first. So I think it's really easy to notice when somebody doesn't listen to us. We feel it. What I would encourage every your as a leader to do is really think about when's the last time you were the one who didn't listen, and really ask the question. I mean, when I was in the dating world, I remember it was like, oh, he has a red flag and he has a red flag, and then I finally went, oh my gosh, what are my red flags? But it took me way too long to ask myself that.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And then you're like, oh, of course everybody's asking the same question about me. What the heck was I
Right,
thinking? Right.
right. Oh
So
my God.
that's the same thing as far as listening. Like just ask your team, how do I listen to you? Is there just ask the question and then be prepared for the answer and encourage that feedback because you can't solve a problem you don't know you have. And if you even try to listen differently and even let people know that you're sincere about it, that's gonna win you favor in the best possible ways.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for that. I think it's been great just kind of hearing your whole history and how you've reached the point of contributing to the world through the listening path. It's really awesome work that you do and just really appreciate you making time. I do want to turn and kind of take a pivot and go into something a little more fun as we kind of wrap things up. So,
Okay.
yeah, I know
We
I've
gonna
given
play field hockey, Bukola?
no, we're not gonna play field hockey. I know I gave you some heavy topics, and
Oh,
I
I like heavy
I
topics.
want I want to
I feel
lighten
very
it up.
comfortable in that space. Yeah, go ahead.
So before we wrap, I thought it'd be good to play a quick game. It's called Pattern Preferences,
Ooh,
and so I'll give you two options, and if you
okay,
if you could just tell me which one feels more like you. There's no overthinking. There's no right or wrong. Just another way for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So I'm
okay,
going to go through a few different ones. And if you could just pick the one that feels more like you and tell us why, and then I'll move to the
okay.
next one. Okay. Silence or small talk?
Probably small talk.
Why small talk?
I like connecting with people. I mean, my small talk might be different than some people's small talk, but I want to get to know you. That's part of that's probably why.
Got it. Plan it out or go with the flow?
Well, I'm truly a hybrid on this. I'm a planner in business and in life. Otherwise, I just love like if I go on vacation, I like go with the flow. So
Mhm.
it's both are beautiful places to be.
Okay. All right. Give advice or ask questions?
Ask questions. Yeah, that's. I mean, not too many because that can interfere with listening. But I think you have to earn the right to give advice.
Conflict head on or ease in slowly?
Well, I think conflict has to be taken head on. That doesn't mean you have to do it in a way that's conflictual.
Hmm.
So, but I think, I mean, gently is different than slowly. So head on gently.
Okay. Okay. Now, is there anything that surprised you or it shifted over time just based on who you know yourself to be?
Yeah, I think, one of the patterns that I thought about when I was thinking about doing this with you tonight was that, I was a very competitive athlete in my younger days. I was pretty successful. And when I got to grad school and studied psychology, I took a group process class. And the theme that rose up, because group process is basically like Survivor, but with food, and you don't go in the jungle. It's all about how norms emerge in groups and how you show up and how people interpret you. And the theme that was really around me is how competitive I am. And people interpreted that a lot about being competitive in relationships. And I had to really look at that because that was not my intention. I'm on the sports field. If you're over 8, you're fair game. Like, and if we're in equal territory in a board game or whatever. But in relationships, competition does not work. Nobody wants to win lose. And even though I wasn't consciously doing that, I think people were interpreting that. And I had to really learn how to soften that a little bit so that that wasn't misunderstood. And that breaking that pattern has served me very, very well.
Yeah. No, I can totally relate to that. I do feel like being a young athlete as well, my coaches were like my dads, and it was always about do your best, do your best, do
Yeah.
your best. And so for me, I just, have approached a lot of situations around, okay, well, if I did my best, that's good enough. And so I saw that everyone's way of looking at that was not the same.
Right.
So I was getting mistaken as competitive, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I'm not competing with you. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to set the
Right.
bar for myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I've had to revisit that too. You beat me to the punch. I was going to ask, what's one pattern you've intentionally kept in your life or leadership because it grounds you or helps you grow? And you kind of touched on it a little bit. Is there anything more you?
Well, I think one of the things I also learned is that competition is my professor on my paper wrote, the root word of competition is competence. So it's balance. It's all, to me, the biggest pattern shift is it's about finding balance. It's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like I always say, I'm very persistent, but I'm also a pain in the ass, right? I am. And I know that about myself. So it's really about brake and gas pedal. It's not about changing or throwing it all out. It's just about knowing when to modulate it. And that's really, I think, time and practice and also my injury, because my world slowed down so much, taught me to be in a different way in the world. And that's the biggest thing, one of the biggest things I learned is be both. Just know when to use it.
No, thank you. Thank you. Now, Christine, thank you for your voice, your tools, your wisdom today. You've really helped us see that listening isn't passive, it's powerful. And to everyone listening, this is your invitation to tune in more deeply to others and to yourself. Essentially, that is a big part of how we can position ourselves to lead ourselves first effectively and then lead others as well. So, no, thank you very much. If this episode resonated, I'd love to hear from you. You can text or leave a voicemail at 404-828-0279. That's 404-828-0279. Or you can visit me at bukolaogintala.com to send in a question, share your story, or explore coaching and speaking services. Whether you're leading a team or learning to lead yourself, I'm honored to be on this journey with you. And if you haven't already, hit follow or subscribe so we can keep growing together.